head as the years go by? It's something we all think about. Well, today we're going to dive right into that. We're talking about the fascinating and, yeah, often misunderstood science of how our brains age. We're going to peel back the layers and get right into the biology of it all. You know that feeling, right? When a word is right on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't grab it? Or a problem that you used to solve in a snap now takes, well, a little longer? It's a question we all ask ourselves. Why does this happen? And is it just inevitable? Well, in this explainer, we're going to go on a journey to find those answers, and we're going to look directly at the science. Okay, so first things first, let's start with what we actually notice day to day. The common familiar signs that tell us our cognitive gears might be shifting just a little bit. And here's the thing, it's not just you. Seriously, taking a little longer to make a decision, forgetting a name for a second, finding it harder to juggle a bunch of tasks at once, those are all classic examples. It doesn't mean something's wrong. A lot of the time, it's just the brain adapting. These are the kinds of circus level changes that scientists call, normal cognitive aging. Okay, so that's what we feel on the outside. But what's actually going on inside our heads? It's time to pop the hood and take a look at the real physical structural changes happening to the brain's architecture. Now, here's a really important point, a big myth we need to bust. Brain aging isn't really about losing tons of brain cells. That's not the whole story. It's much more about the quality of the connections. We're talking about losing synapses. Those are the super important links between our brain cells and whole networks of them becoming a little less efficient. Even the health of the blood vessels in our brain plays a huge role because that affects how nutrients and oxygen get delivered. So think of it this way, it's a story about the quality of the wiring, not just the number of components. All right, let's zoom in even closer. We're going from the big picture, the brain's structure, right down to the cellular level. We're about to meet the tiny, microscopic culprits that are actually driving all these changes. So, first up on our list of culprits is something called oxidative stress. The best way to think about it is like a kind of biological rust. Over your whole life, this imbalance lets these nasty little molecules called free radicals build up. And what do they do? They attack everything, our brain cells, our proteins, even our DNA. It's this slow, steady damage that's a huge reason for that slower mental processing we can sometimes steal. Okay, next on the list, neuroinflammation. And let's be clear, this isn't like when you sprain your ankle and it swells up. No, this is a much sneakier, persistent, low grade inflammation inside the brain. Imagine trying to have a conversation in a really noisy room. That's kind of what this does. It's like damaging background noise that messes with the clear signals our brain cells need to talk to each other. And all of this leads to a massive energy problem. See, our brain is an absolute energy hog. It uses up a huge amount of our body's power, and that energy comes from mitochondria. These are the tiny power plants inside every single cell. But as we age, these little power plants can get less efficient, which creates a full blown energy crisis at the cellular level. And without enough juice, our brain cells just can't keep up with all the heavy lifting of thinking, learning, and remembering. So, we have seen the changes to the structure and the cells, but you might be wondering, what's pulling the strings here? What's controlling all this? Well, it turns out there's this fascinating master control system that basically tells our genes what to do as we get older, and it's called epigenetics. And this hardware software analogy, it's pretty much the perfect way to get it. Think about it. Your DNA sequence, that doesn't really change. That's your hardware. But epigenetics, that's the software that tells the hardware what programs to run, which genes to turn on, which ones to shut off, even how loud to play them. And here's the kicker. This software can, and absolutely does, get updated and changed throughout our lives. So, how does it actually work? Well, you can break it down into three simple steps. One, you've got your DNA, the big book of instructions. Two, over time, little chemical marks get attached to the DNA. The best way to picture them is like little highlighters or sticky notes. And three, these little notes tell your cells which instructions to read and which ones to just ignore. And as we get older, the pattern of these sticky notes changes, and that changes which genes get turned on or off. That has a huge impact on how we age. And just so you know, those sticky notes and highlighters have some pretty technical names. You'll hear scientists talk about things like DNA methylation and histone modifications. That's just the window for the actual chemical processes they study to see how our genes are being controlled all the time. Okay, wow, we just went way down into the microscopic rabbit hole. So let's pull back up now. Let's zoom out and see how all these tiny mechanisms can sometimes move beyond just normal everyday aging and into something a lot more noticeable. And this is where we have to draw a really important line in the sand. On one side, you have what's called age related cognitive decline. That's the normal stuff, subtle changes that don't really get in the way of your daily life. But on the other side, you have something called mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. Now, this is a clinical condition. The changes here are much bigger and can start making complex tasks pretty difficult. It's seen as this middle ground, this transitional state between normal aging and, well, more serious conditions. And this isn't some rare thing either. We're talking about an estimated 22% of people over 70 who are affected by MCI. That's a huge number. And it really underscores why digging into these mechanisms is so important. This is a major public health issue. And here's the connection that makes all of this research so incredibly urgent. See, while not everyone with MCI goes on to develop dementia, it's a huge risk factor. It can be the first step towards devastating diseases like Alzheimer's. And when you realize that dementia is now the seventh leading cause of death in the entire world, you get why understanding these early changes is just absolutely critical. Okay, so after all that pretty heavy science, you might be thinking, where does this leave us? Let's wrap this up because I think this last part is maybe the most empowering piece of the whole story. And here it is. This is the key takeaway. While, yeah, aging itself is a one way street, the rate and the quality of how our brain ages, that is not set in stone. More and more research shows that the very things we just talked about, that oxidative stress, the inflammation, the health of our blood vessels, all of it can be influenced by things that are actually in our control. We're talking about stuff like our diet and how much we move. So that brings us to a final thought to leave you with. We see in the brain aging as this incredibly complex recipe, right? It's got our genes, cellular stress, that epigenetic software, all mixed together. But we've also learned that our lifestyle choices, what we eat, how we live, those are powerful ingredients that we can actually add to the recipe ourselves. So the question isn't for me, it's for you. Knowing all this, what are you going to add to your recipe? We all want to keep our minds sharp, right? Especially as we get older. And a lot of us turn to diets and supplements, hoping for that extra edge. But what actually works? In this explainer, we're going to cut through all the noise and look at the real, science backed ways to protect your brain for the long haul. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the absolute foundation of brain health. Then we'll dive into the power of what you eat. We'll navigate the very tricky world of supplements, talk about some really important safety stuff, and then wrap it all up with a clear strategy you can actually use. This is the big question, isn't it? Can a pill really do the same job as a healthy diet? We are just bombarded with ads for supplements promising better memory, their focus. But what does the science have to say? Let's follow the evidence together and find out. Okay, to make sense of all this information, let's use a really simple framework. We're going to call it the brain health pyramid. And this model is going to help us see what truly matters and what's just, well, extra. And here it is. This is the foundation of our pyramid, and it is absolutely non negotiable. The science on this is crystal clear. The single most powerful thing you can do to protect your brain isn't a pill or some fancy powder, it's what you're putting on your plate day in and day out. So, what's the actual proof behind this? I mean, it's not just about feeling a little more awake after a good meal. It turns out that a diverse diet can physically protect and even change the shape of your brain over time. The research here is, wow, it's really compelling. A plant rich, diverse diet, we're talking lots of different colors and nutrients, is consistently linked to better brain function. And get this, it's also connected to preserving the actual physical structure of the brain. It's like all those antioxidants from the different foods create this protective shield for our brain cells. And on the flip side, diets full of ultra processed junk, they're directly linked to cognitive decline. It's a pretty clear picture. And this quote right here from a major scientific review just nails it. A high quality, diverse diet can help protect the hippocampus, that's your brain's memory center. We're talking about a real, measurable physical effect. It's not just a nice idea. All right, so the foundation is set, food first. But what about that next level of the pyramid? This brings us to the multi-billion-dollar supplement industry. So, where do they fit in? Let's try to separate the marketing hype from what's actually helpful. Have you ever felt like you're getting whiplash from all the supplement news? One day, a headline says something is a miracle cure, and the next day, another study says it does nothing. Well, that confusion often comes from something called the evidence gap. So here's the deal. You have these small, early studies that get really exciting results and they generate all this media hype. But those small studies are also way more likely to be influenced by bias or just plain statistical luck. Then, later on, when researchers do these huge, really high quality studies on thousands of people, those amazing benefits often just fade away. That's why we have to look past the initial headlines. Let's use a popular one as an example, curcumin. It's the active stuff in turmeric. And in a lab, it looks incredible. It's got these amazing anti-inflammatory and brain protective powers. But there's a big catch when you try to get it to work inside the human body. The problem is something called bioavailability. It's a fancy word, but it just means how much of something your body can actually absorb and use. And it turns out our bodies are super efficient at getting rid of curcumin, so not much actually gets to do its job. But, and this is so cool, research found a little trick. If you combine it with piperine, which comes from black pepper, you can boost its absorption by up to 2,000%. It just goes to show you how you take a supplement can be just as important as what you're taking. And you see this pattern of really specific, nuanced benefits with other popular supplements too. B vitamins, they might help slow brain shrinkage, but mainly in older folks who already have high levels of an amino acid called homocysteine. Omega 3s, they show some memory benefits, but mostly in people who don't have dementia. The evidence for ginkgo is all over the place, with the biggest studies showing it doesn't really prevent dementia. And lion's mane mushroom, it looks promising in early studies, but we definitely need more research. See the pattern? It's all very specific. And that brings us to the very peak of our pyramid, where we need to be the most careful. It's so important to remember this. The word natural does not automatically mean safe. Just because something comes from a plant doesn't mean it can't have risks. This is something a lot of people just don't realize. Supplements are not regulated with the same strictness as prescription drugs, but they are biologically active. They can have really powerful effects, and this is key. They can interact with other medications you might be taking. Here is a perfect and frankly kind of scary example. Ginkgo biloba, a popular memory supplement, it can seriously increase your risk of bleeding if you take it with common blood thinners like warfarin or even just a dairy aspirin. This is a big deal, and a lot of people have no idea. And check out this chain reaction. Metformin is a really common drug for diabetes, but taking it long term can actually cause a deficiency in vitamins B6 and B12. And as we just talked about, not having enough of those B vitamins is linked to poor brain function. It just shows how everything in our health is connected. Okay, so after all of that, what's the takeaway? What do we actually do with this information? Let's pull it all together into a simple, actionable strategy using our brain health pyramid. Here is your game plan in a nutshell. The foundation, your absolute must have, is a diverse plant rich diet. That's your number one defense. Then, in the middle, you can consider supplements, but with caution. Think of them as potential support for specific issues, not a replacement for good food. And at the very top, the golden rule. Always, always talk to your doctor or pharmacist before you start anything new, especially if you're already on other medications. Protecting our cognitive health is a lifelong journey, and having the right information is the most powerful tool you can have. So if you found this helpful, maybe you share this explainer with a friend or family member who's just starting to enter their senior years. Empowering them with this kind of knowledge is one of the best ways you can support their health. Thanks so much for tuning in.